If you've been following me the past couple years, you know that I've covered Zionist organizations involved in the migrant crisis. There is now overwhelming evidence indicating that Russian intelligence is also involved. To some of you, this sounds crazy. That's because a lot of your favorite alt-media personalities are a controlled opposition. For years, they've been ridiculing criticism of Russia, and it's gotten to the point where so many people online now believe that any criticism of Russia is a lie. Let's begin our investigation into weaponized migration. Here's an article from The Observer titled, "How the Kremlin Manipulates Europe's Refugee Crisis." An unnamed senior security official from one of NATO's border states is quoted as saying, "Migrants go where the FSB sends them. Many of the human traffickers are FSB agents." Some of you think this is fake news. Well, Greece recently sentenced 2 Russian sailors to almost 400 years in prison for trafficking migrants. Russia's foreign ministry estimated that Greece is holding 24 Russian sailors and that Italy is holding 23 Russian sailors. Clearly, this is a network. Human trafficking is organized crime. Anyone well researched on Russian organized crime knows that the FSB is involved. Here's an article from US News titled, "Russia Positioning Itself in Libya to Unleash Migrant Crisis into Europe." Again, some of you think this is fake news. Well, the Russian Foreign Ministry said that the 47 Russian sailors being detained in Greece and Italy are being charged with transporting illegal immigrants from countries including Libya. Yes, NATO was used to destroy Libya, similarly to how Israel used the US and Britain to destroy Iraq. But the fact is, Russia's private military, the Wagner Group, is there now, filling the power vacuum. Libyan Interior Minister Fatih Bashaga said, "The Russians have intervened to pour fuel on the fire and enhance the crisis, rather than finding a solution." Why would Russia want to find a solution when they can sell billions of dollars worth of weapons, have groups fight for their oil interests, and traffic migrants? This is the Russian military-industrial complex. If you listen to RT regularly, you probably believe that only the US profits from war. You have to be living in a fantasy land if you think that Putin is going to leave all that money on the table. The Libyan Interior Minister also said, "Wherever Wagner goes, destruction happens." And there is some truth to that. The Wagner Group filmed themselves laughing while they tortured and beheaded a Syrian man. Link is in the description in case any of you are into that stuff. Russian news outlet Novaya Gazeta also identified one of the mercenaries involved. Wagner Group's main backer Yevgeny Prigozhin, nicknamed Putin's chef, also receives billions of dollars worth of state contracts from Putin. Yes, RT covered the war in Libya. They did that to make the West look bad. Meanwhile, Putin has stated multiple times that he doesn't care what happens to Libya.
Как вы относитесь к тому, что сейчас творится вокруг Ливии?
Ливия. Правительство России не занимается внешними делами, внешней политикой. Правительство у нас занимается главным образом социально-экономическими вопросами. Посмотрите на карту этого региона мира. Там кругом монархия. Там что, демократия, что ли, кругом? По датскому образцу? Нет. Кругом монархические государства. Господин Каддафи изобрел новую монархию. Так же, когда Наполеон, после того, как пришел на волне революции к власти, объявил себя императором. Сравнение, может быть, не совсем корректное, но в целом параллель уместна. Ну да, это монархия по сути своей. Кривая, косая, какая угодно. Ненормальная, ну такая. Там возникли внутренние противоречия, которые перешли в вооруженный конфликт. Почему нужно со стороны вмешиваться в этот вооруженный конфликт? А что, мало разве у нас кривых всяких режимов в мире? Мы что, везде будем вмешиваться во внутренний конфликт?
The Soviet shills and alt media will portray Putin as an enemy of Israel, but in reality he went along with their plan in Libya, just like he did with Iraq and Afghanistan. This close relationship has been going on for decades. The Soviets would sell guns to the Arabs, but not enough for them to defeat Israel, and Gaddafi even called them out on it. He said, "What have the Russians done for the Arabs? The ceasefire with Israel must end, and the battle must begin." Why doesn't the battle begin? Because the Russians prefer and profit from the present state of no peace, no war. The Russians talk of all the weapons they are giving us, but it is propaganda. Now back to human trafficking. The one group that needs no convincing about Russia's manipulation of the migrant issue is the migrants themselves. African migrants interviewed in Kandalaksha said they had each paid thousands of dollars to guides who promised to get them to Finland and who worked closely with Russian officials. The system was highly organized, the migrants said, with no more than 30 people allowed to make the journey to Finland each day. Who went when and in which vehicle was established in advance, they said, with the guides and officials drawing up detailed lists with names, departure dates, and cars. They are all in the same clique. The officials, the hotel people, the drivers. This is their business, said Honore Basubi, a young migrant from West Africa who had come to Russia as a student. Like many of the other migrants who traveled to Kandalaksha, he said he had been issued a Russian deportation order before setting out and been told to leave quickly for Europe. Saeed Musa Khan, along with his family and around a dozen other asylum seekers, set out at dawn from Kandalaksha in a convoy of old cars and accompanied by Russian guides, breezed through 3 checkpoints to reach the Finnish border. Khan, who sat with his wife and baby son in the backseat of a wheezing Lada, said he had never even heard of Finland when he left Kabul in 2014, and after 2 years in Russia and Belarus, still was not really sure where it was he was going. But he knew he wanted to get his family to Europe and had been assured that he would get there once he had paid $6,000 to a facilitator in Moscow, who immediately arranged for the family to be issued with a deportation order by the Russian authorities. He asked me where I wanted to go and said, "No problem, we will get you to Finland. Everybody is going there now," said Khan. It's not just Greece and Italy who are investigating Russian migrant traffickers. The Finnish border guard is also investigating around 100 cases of organized criminal activity related to human smuggling from Russia. Jussi Niinisto, the Finnish defense minister in 2016, said, "The illegal migration via the eastern border, Russia, is undeniably our most serious challenge. In practice, the potential is limitless, from hundreds of thousands to 1 million people who are ready to move out of Russia. In that sense, the situation is worrying, not just for Finland, but for other European countries." If you're well researched on Mossad and KGB, you know that they have a long history of infiltrating the Muslim world. Polish intelligence believes that Russia is using the migrant crisis to also get its spies into Europe. They pose as Middle East refugees, and once taken in, the KGB has its network of elite agents and terrorists in an enemy country. Greece, Italy, Finland, and Poland. That's 4 European countries with evidence of Russia's role in the migrant crisis. And Helsinki is openly accusing the Kremlin and its intelligence services of flooding Finland and therefore the EU with refugees as a political weapon to destabilize Europe. If you've seen part 2 of my last documentary, you know that Russia wants the rest of Europe weakened and divided. Because once NATO is dissolved, Putin can do whatever he wants in Ukraine and Poland, which he considers part of his Eurasian Union. Putin jails separatists in Russia and its occupied territories. Meanwhile, he promotes separatism in Europe because he wants it destabilized. He even tried to balkanize Spain. The Soviet propagandists often talk about how bad Israel is for wanting to break up Syria, and I agree with them there. But then these same hypocrites promoted the attempt to break up Spain. Imagine if I said that Syria is a failed state and the Kurds should have their own state inside of it. You would call me a Zionist. Communist agents and alt media want to destabilize Europe the same way Zionists want to destabilize the Middle East. Patrick Henningsen is another one of Putin's controlled opposition within the anti-Zionist movement, and he uses the exact same cultural Marxist talking points as Ben Norton. These Soviet shills whine about Russophobia just as much as Zionist shills whine about anti-Semitism. The KGB uses hundreds of its operatives in the alt media to manipulate you into supporting their agenda. When gullible people see so many of their favorite online personalities promoting the destabilization of Europe, they go on to believe that it's a good thing. So many people see Julian Assange as a hero, even though he tried to incite civil war in Spain while openly being financed by a hostile foreign country.
Söyleyeyim, bir ay ceza girdim Türkiye'de. Gittim hapishaneye, bir ay girdim. Bugün bize servis bıraktılar. Dedi ki gidin. Paramız yok, telefonumuz yok. Mecbur ne yapacağız abi? Gideyim Avrupa'ya gideyim ya kendimi kurtulayım abi. Başka bir çaresim yok bizim Afganlar. Bizim Afganlara kadri kıymeti Türkiye'de yok abi.
Buraya nasıl geldiniz?
Kaçak.
Hayır. Buraya sınıra kadar nasıl geldiniz?
Valla taksi bize getirmiş. Polis bize dedi ki gidin yol açık.
Erdogan has sent roughly 30,000 migrants to Greece's border, and he's threatening to send millions more. Some of them were just released from jail and are using tear gas against the Greek police. They had to have received support from the Turkish authorities, and they're trying to break their way in. This is clearly weaponized migration by way of Erdogan. I'm sure there are liberals watching this who want those people to be helped. Greece has already taken in more than 1 million migrants since 2015. They can't afford to take in any more, and they're not going to. What's crazy is that Erdogan actually threatened to do this over 2 months ago. According to the UN, 235,000 civilians fled their homes during the Russian-backed bombing campaign in rebel-held Idlib between December 12th to December 25th. Erdogan made it clear to Putin that Turkey couldn't handle the wave of migrants from Syria and warned that Europe will feel the impact if the bombing is not stopped. So what did Putin do? He said, wait a minute, that actually benefits me. Then he kept on bombing and Erdogan went through with his promise. This situation with Greece would have never happened without Russia. When Trump bombed Idlib last October, you did not have all these refugees fleeing to Turkey. Yes, US soldiers don't always take into consideration the lives of civilians during airstrikes. Neither do Russian soldiers. All these people started fleeing Idlib when Russia joined in on the bombing. Look, I'm not a fan of Trump. I'm saying that there needs to be objectivity. If Trump bombed Syria and created all these refugees, you know damn well most of the alt media would be chanting death to America and calling for the end of the American empire. But when Russia creates all these refugees, no one here says a word. Yes, Russia has Syria's permission to be there, but that doesn't change the fact that they have little regard for civilians and are contributing to this migrant crisis. Do you think Syrians would want to stay in the country if their children could lose a leg stepping on a cluster bomb? The Soviet shills and alt media are always going on about how Putin is saving Syria from Israel. Bibi has publicly said that he has no problem with the Assad government. Regime change was never a part of the plan. Aside from weakening Syria, Israel wanted Iran's forces away from its border, and Putin helped accomplish that. Putin is selling guns to the Arabs and profiteering from the conflict, while at the same time defending Israel. These Soviet shills like Zion Fraudson are always going on about how Zionists hate Putin, but in reality, Putin just received the Friends of Zion award. To Putin, migrants are a weapon, and he has threatened to do to Finland what Erdogan just did to Greece. Back in 2016, so many decrepit Soviet-era cars carried migrants into Europe from this frozen Russian town in recent months that border officials in Finland, who confiscated the rust bucket vehicles as soon as they crossed the frontier, watched in dismay as their parking lot turned into a scrapyard. Then, as suddenly and as mysteriously as it had started, the parade of migrants in rusty old cars came to an abrupt halt, or at least a pause. Unfortunately, this looks like a political demonstration by Russia, said Ilkka Kanerva, Finland's former foreign minister and now the chairman of its Parliamentary Defense Committee. They are very skillful at sending signals. They want to show that Finland should be very careful when it makes its own decisions on things like military exercises, our partnership with NATO, and European Union sanctions against Russia.
AJC has always worked on the premise that as a minority, our security, our strength, our well-being in America is interdependent with those of other minorities. This is a Jewish issue. It is a Jewish issue to care about those around us, to care about the larger society. It is very much a Jewish issue.
I'm sure most of you find so many ordinary left-wing Zionists that support open borders for the US and Europe, and you're wondering why? I think because of their history of evictions and growing up constantly being told how persecuted they are, they feel that they will not survive in their host country, so they use other minorities for their benefit.
זה השם הכי נפוץ באנגליה, נכון? אז אנחנו רוצים שזה יהיה השם הכי נפוץ באנגליה ושיהיה המון מוחמד באנגליה, בשוודיה, בצרפת, לא פה, זה מה שאנחנו רוצים.
Then there are elite right-wing Zionists who have their own ethno-state, but still want open borders for Europe. Why? I think a lot of that has to do with diabolical religious fanaticism. I'm not downplaying the Zionist role in all this. I've already gone over it many times. Most of you aren't aware that this migrant crisis actually benefits Putin geopolitically, so that's what I wanted to address with this video. Until next time, peace.